So I've been talking with a couple of you with some frustrations that you said you were having with the North Carolina Essential Standards. And one of the problems that I heard some people talking about was that you have been presented the standards in a way that is chronological before. Like if you look at other states, you'll find that they have one of the standards is related to the American Revolution, another standard is related to the early national period, another standard is related to the Civil War, etc. And the problem with the North Carolina Essential Standards is that it is not a chronological set of standards. Those standards that we've had in the past, in fact, in the old standard course of study, the standards in American history in particular were organized chronologically. In an attempt to try to change the way that we do business in North Carolina, the Essential Standards were organized as conceptual standards, which means that rather than the focus of the standards being the content, the focus of the standards were concepts. For instance, and I've got a couple of examples right here I want to pull up and show you. I hope you can see it. If not, I'm referencing right now AH2.H.2.1. And so what we have is we have analyzed key political, economic, and social turning points since the end of Reconstruction in terms of causes and effects. Well, that sounds relatively familiar, but if you notice, it says since the end of Reconstruction. It doesn't tell you what our topics are. It gives us some idea of some things that we might cover, but it gives us this broad range. And if we go over actually to the standards for U.S. History 1, it looks ridiculously familiar. If you go over to U.S. History 1, a very similar standard, analyze how economic, political, social, military, and religious factors influence European exploration, American colonial settlement. What it is doing is this is a conceptual curriculum, which means that we are focused on these factors, economic, political, social, military, and religious factors. They become the organizing feature of the curriculum as it is established. That becomes difficult for people that are just learning the curriculum. It is not nearly as easy as going through and say, okay, in Unit 1 you cover this, in Unit 2 you cover this, which means then that we have a couple of options. And this is what I hope will clarify this for you. This doesn't change the chronology. In fact, you can still teach chronologically the topics that you need to. It is just emphasizing the concepts that are there so that we're not focused on simply marching through time. The way we've done it before when it is solely chronological is we have a tendency to march through time. That's what we're trying to prevent with this curriculum. But it doesn't make it easy for us to organize. So here's the deal. We can do this in a couple of different ways, and I want to show you how we do that. Let me turn this off for just a minute. And when I turn this off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about these sorts of topics that are up here and the things that we might be able to do with the topics that we're given. Okay, so let's take, for instance, this idea of economic, social, religious, and political factors. Let's think about it in terms of something like a content outline. You're going to be designing a content outline for this sort of course, and you want to know exactly what to put in that content outline, which is in essence where all this stuff goes, right? So let's take a look at it. I can do one of two things. I can actually organize my curriculum chronologically. So for instance, if I want to talk about the colonial period, right? And then I want to have a unit later on the American Revolution, right? That's all well and good. According to the curriculum, I can still teach it chronologically. I know that I've got to cover these time periods. I can still cover it chronologically. But I'd better make sure that in each of these units, one of my lessons or one of my talking points is actually about economic, social, religious, and military factors that influence ... You see what I mean? And I need to make sure that that theme, which is in that standard that we just looked at, is in this unit as well. Again, the different types of factors, economic, social, religious factors, I need to make sure there are some lessons related to that. That's how I fit in my content outline. Another way that I could actually do it, however, would be to take a little bit different approach to it, right? And to actually do it in this way. Sorry that you just had to look at me that close up. Is I actually have a unit on economic, social, or religious factors. And then my topics become these factors in the colonial period. These factors in the American Revolution, right? These factors in the early national period. Regardless of which way I do it, if you can see that, regardless of which way I do it, whether I do it with content unit topics or if I do it with conceptual unit topics, I still have the same thing going on, right? It's just assuring that I am covering these conceptual elements and this content within one of the two frameworks, right? So if you are hung up on the fact that you want to teach the colonial period, the American Revolution, the North Carolina Central Standards do not imply that you can't do that. What it simply says is that you must make sure that you cover these conceptual themes as your content outline. If you want to follow the standards as they're written, what you've then got to do is take that standard and address each time period and how it relates to that. This is a chronological organization, chrono, right? This is a conceptual organization. Both are acceptable. This is more traditional. This is a newer way to do it. But the idea is that we're covering the same things regardless. It's just the way that we organize our units. I hope that this clarifies the questions that you had, and I hope that this makes it a little bit easier than some of the things that are happening in 3000.